Yeah. All right. So, number 84 coming in with 70 overall points. Perro Aguayo. And I know Andretti, he's got another one for us again because he made it on his list. So, give it to us, Andretti.
Yeah, some of these guys got a lot of points because I had them really high on my list. But Aguayo, look, he had a really great run prior to 84 whenever we started the clock. But the reason why Perro Aguayo makes it for me is because of everything he did post 84, which is just incredible. This guy's had an incredible run. There's a really great bio piece by a guy named Alfredo Esparza that's on Lucha World, on the Lucha World website. If anybody wants to Google that and go read this really great write up that this guy did on his whole life, which I read it a couple times. And I was like, man, this guy does really good work on the site. He's one of the greatest Mexican wrestlers ever, man. I mean, a 35-year career as a top draw. I mean, he's probably right behind the really big names like Santo and Blue Demon and Mascaras and guys like that. I mean, he's got to be right up there with that. But despite the fact that he was predominantly a heel, I mean, the guy was extremely popular his whole career. And it's because of his charisma. I mean, he just, when you look at this guy, man, like the appearance of him is just so outstanding. I mean, in an environment where people are wearing masks and everybody's really colorful and things like that. I mean, Aguayo is a guy that just has this really thick, kind of shaggy, dark hair, big furry boots. He's got scars all over him. Not a great looking dude. I mean, when he first started, he was kind of a good looking guy, but when you talk about what he ended up looking like years later, man, I mean, he just looked like a freaking killer by the time he was done. But I mean, he's just super aggressive guy. I think Meltzer said at one point that he's kind of like the Mexican Terry Funk. So that's probably a good way to kind of look at what he was. But at a time when EMLL, early to mid 70s needed to create new stars, there was nobody hotter than Perro Aguayo, and he kind of was just a guy that fit into a spot, and the timing was perfect for him at that point. I mean, he was booked into an enormous match. Again, man, I know that we're talking about post 84, but there's still some stuff, since his career is so much, on both sides of that line. I kind of just wanted to bring it up. And he had an enormous match in 1975 against El Santo that kind of was the one that made him the star that he was. I mean, that was kind of his big match. And look, man, then you fast forward to our timeline as of 84. And at this point, Aguayo's still having an amazing career that would last several more decades. But the focus at that point really was on the feuds and not so much really on titles at that point. And the thing about just Lucha Libre in general, I mean, they don't really treat the belts the same way that we do in the United States, right? They just don't. It's more about kind of whoever is holding a belt ends up making a belt really popular in that moment, right? And look, CMLL has got a million belts right now, right? And if you ask somebody like, what's the main belt? I mean, people are going to tell you different things because there's guys that are super over that might be holding like a junior title, and that might actually be the most important title in their promotion in that given moment, right? So, but for Aguayo, it was more about the feuds. Post 84 is more about just having these long-standing, amazing feuds. He had the early 90s major feud with hot young Conan, hair versus mask. Aguayo ends up winning that and taking Conan's mask. That match is on YouTube, man. You can go watch that match right now for free if you want to go watch it. But AAA starts in 92, and Aguayo is basically the biggest star in Mexico at that point. He signs with AAA. And I think, I was thinking about this last night. A good way to probably look at that, with AAA just starting and then bringing in a really established star is kind of like Jericho, right? It's kind of like AEW bringing in Jericho. So if you think about it like that, it would be like him being AAA's Chris Jericho when they signed him at that point to come in and be a big star at that point. But the 1994 blood match with Conan, The first ever Triple A pay per view was here in LA. I mean, that unbelievable match, man. If you can find that and you can watch it, please go do it. But when everybody bailed Mexico for WCW, whenever the economy was bad there in Mexico, and everybody jumped ship and came to WCW, whenever during that big run there in like the mid to late 90s. Aguayo stayed in Mexico at that point, and became one of the major stars again. Man, he was just he was, the timing was there for him multiple times in his career. The timing was really there. He ended up wrestling. He actually wrestled at the Royal Rumble '97 in San Antonio in a trios match. Look, if you go back and watch that match right now, that's kind of, he's a little slow at that point. At that point in his career, he's a little slow. But I mean, you can just tell, man. Whenever he's walking back from the ring to the locker room after that match is over, man, you can just tell how important that moment was for him. And he's slapping hands with the crowd. He's got a big smile on his face, and getting to perform in front of that many people, in the U.S. is a big deal for them. And I look, in the same vein, I got to give my hat off to JR for that too, man, because Ross came to that match so prepared to call that match and gave everybody in the ring equal amount of time and had good facts, good stories about all those guys that were in that match, who nobody in the U.S. had any idea who the hell those guys were that were in that match. And look, and you know what, man, I also got to give credit. I got to give credit to Jerry Lawler when calling that match too, because Lawler showed a lot of restraint and didn't say anything stupid. He just was a normal person who didn't know any of the guys in the ring, who just sat there, gave a little bit of commentary when he needed to, didn't say anything dumb, and was a human being in the commentary booth. But McMahon was the one that was the main commentator at that point. McMahon did okay in that match, and McMahon, at times, we all know, kind of can get a little bored during a match and maybe start saying stupid things here and there. But I really got to give especially Ross, especially McMahon, and even Lawler too, credit for that Royal Rumble trios match, man, because that crowd was super dead. The crowd was super dead. Nobody knew who the hell those guys were. It was a very different style than what the fans were used to. But look, man, if you want to go and you want to check that match out, it starts out a little rough, but there's really good lucha action throughout that match. And Hector Garza's in that match. Garza ends up being a badass in TNA, not too long after that. So there's a lot of good reasons to go and check that out. What else I had written down here? It should probably be mentioned that his son, Perro Aguayo Jr., got into wrestling and was really a hot young up and comer. They even kind of mentioned him in that Royal Rumble match, which was sad, because apparently Perro Aguayo Jr. wrestled a dark match before the Royal Rumble went on the air that year, but he passed away in the ring. He died in the ring, and Rey Mysterio was the one that was involved in that, and that he got absolved of everything. The family was very much in support of Rey Mysterio, and they said it wasn't his fault. Please don't think that it was your fault and things like that. But what's really cool about that story is that Rey Mysterio ended up being a pallbearer at Perro Aguayo Jr.'s funeral, and he went to the funeral without a mask. He went there as himself, and that was a major deal. As I'm sure you can understand, that was a major deal for him to do that. Perro Aguayo then ended up retiring, and he ended up passing away on his own a couple of years ago in 2019. But man, when you look back on that guy's legacy and just being predominantly a heel, just a really, nasty looking guy that stood out so much against everybody around him, that had all these colorful moves and these colorful attires and things like that. I mean, just what a run that guy had, man.
All right. So coming in at before we move on, I also want to mention that Perro Aguayo was also he was also a Hall of Fame. He was put in the Hall of Fame in 2015. So, obviously, Observer Hall of Famer. So good on him as well.